Welcome back to the Center in the City podcast. I'm your host, Wade Brill, and I am so glad you are here. On the pod today, I am so excited to welcome back Lindsey Simcik. We have such a soulful conversation talking about everything from transitions and these portals in our life. We talk about the Saturn returns, her new book, Almost 30, what happens when we self-abandon ourselves and how we can come back to ourselves, practicing trust and resting into divine timing. And we talk about motherhood. This episode is so juicy. Here's a little background on Lindsey if you're not familiar with her amazing creative force, but she is an entrepreneur, a media personality, and she's best known for co-founding and co-hosting the critically acclaimed Almost 30 podcast alongside her co-host Krista. They also have a spin-off podcast called The Morning Microdose, which is bite-sized bits from the Almost 30 podcast. Beyond the mic, Lindsey also created the Sacredness of Being Single program, which has guided thousands of women to embrace that in-between stage with confidence. And most recently, Lindsey has launched her new creation, New Mom on the Block, which is a brand designed to support new moms owning their unique flavor of motherhood through resources, products, and a vibrant community. You can check out Lindsey's whole bio in the show notes, as well as links to everything that she's up to, including her new book, Almost 30, a definitive guide to a life you love for the next decade and beyond. Before we transition into today's interview, I want to let you know that there are a few more weeks to sign up for the Summer of Self-Care group coaching program. This is my signature group coaching program that is designed to help you reconnect to yourself, build sustainable self-care habits, and feel more grounded and energized from the inside out. I love facilitating this program because as women, we tend to think that what we're experiencing is just us. It's just happening to us. But when we connect to a group of like-minded women, we start to hear ourselves and each other, and we start to recognize that we're not alone on this journey of life. And we feel so much more inspired and empowered when we connect in community. During this program, you'll learn about the Mindful Hand of Self-Care framework. It becomes a mental and physical reminder of how to honor and care for yourself through a holistic lens. Can't wait for you to join us. So learn more in the show notes or head on over to wadebrill.com/summer of self-care. Now, wherever you're listening to this podcast, while you're on a walk, while you're cooking, while you're driving, I welcome you to settle in and let's get centered. Lindsey, welcome back to the Center in the City podcast.
Hi, Wade. I'm so excited to be here. It's been a minute. I was saying that before. I'm like, wow, I can't believe it's been just about 2 years since we last spoke on your pod.
I was kind of mind blown how fast time has gone. And not only did you just birth a child last time you came on the podcast, but now you birthed a book.
I know. It's crazy to think. Thank you. Thank you. We have our book coming out June 3rd, Krista and I, and we began writing it when probably just before you and I spoke, the spring of 2023. And yeah, it's just the process of writing the book was like so interesting because you're so focused on this one thing for a very concentrated period of time, and then you kind of wait. You're in the editing phase, you're in kind of this like marketing strategy planning push, and you kind of like walk away from the book a little bit, and then as you walk back and reorient yourself to it, I found that I'm like, oh, okay, like I'm really proud of this. And this is really good. You know what I mean? Like when you first write it, you're like, is this even good? Like, should I just write it over? All of these like limiting beliefs and judgmental thoughts. I know you just wrote your book and published your book. Like I can imagine there was kind of some similar thoughts and feelings like as you put it out there. But yeah, overall, I'm just so excited for people to have this.
Oh, 100%. It's so vulnerable. And also, what I've heard from authors before is that marketing your book is the hardest part because you wrote it so long ago. And so then there's this like, oh, I have to kind of dig deep to come back to this version of myself that wrote this book and be present to that as I share it, where, you might feel like you're in a totally different stage by the time the book is out and then get to talk about it. So I don't know if that resonates for you as well.
Yeah, completely. Krista and I are actually going to be doing a healing with our healer and teacher Manuela later today because we just want to call our energy back to be with the book right now. We've been so excited. I feel like doing the most when it comes to marketing and just, spreading the word about the book over the last few months. And, there are aspects of us that are kind of on to the next thing, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just want to call that energy back because it deserves our presence. And I told myself last week, I was like, okay, on Monday, it begins the celebration. I am choosing to be so freaking excited about this. I'm not going to let, whatever thoughts in my head or whatever pressures I feel internally or externally just steal my joy around this. So it has begun.
I love that. Well, I want to celebrate with you because I really, and I'm not just saying this, I think this book is really amazing. And I wish it was around when I was in my 20s because my favorite aspect of this book is how holistic it is. I think most books that are self help and self guided for these times in our life where we have big transitions are more geared in like, this is your career transition book. This is what happens with relationships. This is, your relationship to your body, but you both just blended them all and took this holistic lens, which really resonates to me in how I view life and how I view our responsibility to care for our life is a holistic lens. It's not just one. And so I just want to really celebrate that because it feels like, oh my God, this is so juicy. I'm only like halfway through the book and I'm like, there's so much here and journal prompts and snippets from the podcast. Like you guys just did, I think, a really beautiful job of painting this whole picture of what it looks like to go through a portal in your life.
Yeah.
And I want to begin by just having you highlight for listeners who maybe don't know, but what is a Saturn return moment? And what is that kind of transition moment that both you and Krista really have the spark of inspiration to write this book from, as well as I know a lot of the podcast conversations and the ethos of where the podcast came from.
Yeah, when we found out we were going through our Saturn return, we felt such a deep sense of relief. And so I'm really excited for people to understand whether they are about to go through it, are going through it right now, or have gone through it, even to reflect on this time. So let's start with the Saturn return to define this late 20s period. So, astrologically speaking, every single person is going to move through a Saturn return around the age of 29 and a half. However, there is, kind of this lead up period, and it can vary from person to person depending on your chart. So, Saturn, the planet, will every 29 and a half years come back to the place in the sky it was when you were born. And this is significant because the planet Saturn is really kind of like this cosmic father. He comes in and he's like, okay, I love you dearly. Now, there are aspects of how you are living your life, how you are showing up for your life, the relationships that you are in, the direction you are going, where you are living, how you are treating yourself, and the list goes on, that are not aligned. Not aligned now, or maybe just not aligned anymore. And so we got to look at this honestly. It's going to feel a little bit like a tough love season. And we have to get in right relationship with ourselves so that we can make decisions that align with who we really are now and who we're really becoming. And so what this can look like in reality is it could feel like your life is falling apart a little bit. The relationship that you've had since college, all of a sudden you feel like, I don't know if this is my person. Or, the city that you've lived in your whole life, you suddenly feel like I'm being called somewhere else, or, I really deeply want to find purpose in my career, or, I've never felt connected to my body, but it's sending me signals and I haven't felt like myself. And I really feel like I should get right with my body. So there's so many ways that Saturn can affect you. And I think it is the one of the greatest opportunities to get in relationship with yourself and with change, because spoiler alert, we're going to have many, many, many moments and seasons of change in our life, right? It's how we show up for it. It's how we approach it that really kind of colors our experience. So if we can be in right relationship with change, all of a sudden these periods of unknown and just kind of like seeming challenge become like an adventure, become a welcome challenge, because based on your experience during your Saturn return, that change wants to work with you and work on you so you can become more of who you're meant to be. So that is the astrological perspective of this late 20s portal. Now we can ground ourselves in a little bit of science because I think it helps. Your brain just does incredible things in this late 20s period. Your prefrontal cortex, the area of your brain responsible for decision making and long term planning and emotional regulation, comes online around 26 or so. Up until this point, your limbic system, your limbic part of your brain, the emotional part of your brain, has been running the show. If you think back to like your teens and your early 20s, you were probably making impulsive decisions, very much letting your emotions kind of run the show on the day to day, which is perfectly normal, perfectly on track. So in your late 20s, these two systems, these two parts of your brain sync up. And what happens is that you become more conscious. So, Wade, I'm sure you can think of, you know, periods and moments in this time in your life when you just became a bit more conscious to, what you're bringing to every moment, to every relationship, or a bit more conscious to, the way that my, parents brought me up in this particular way does affect, how I am now as an adult, or just becoming conscious of how you're feeling in relationships and so on. So it's really a beautiful time, but can be intense because up until this point, you didn't really feel that stuff. Um, and last little, food for thought around the brain. It's pretty incredible. In your late 20s, myelation in your brain is at its peak. So myelation is basically this like protective coating around the neural pathways. And so this is a prime time to create new neural pathways and really solidify them. So to, make new grooves in your brain of beliefs that are really true and that you want to live by and that you want to believe about yourself and your life and the world. And it's a really beautiful time to do that, and you're primed for that. So all that to say, it's an intense period. And if people listening are moving through that time in their life and they're like, yeah, it's really intense. Like, I don't know if this is for my greatest good. I just want to comfort you that it absolutely is. You are being primed for an incredible life ahead of adventure and magic and just being able to be yourself, and I think that's such a gift for you and for the world. So, I'm hopeful that this book serves as like just a back pocket best friend, like with deep, soul stirring reminders and wisdom from our podcast guests and just funny, true stories that hopefully you can relate to from Krista and I, and a bit of science and research just to ground us. But I was blown away when I found out what my Saturn return was, and then could finally be like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy. My life isn't falling apart and I can really do this.
I love so many things that you just shared around noticing these moments of change in our life, how we can look at them as adventures instead of this like, holy fuck, I need to like grip really hard to the change and the uncertainty and like what's happening, what part of me is shedding. I don't want to let it go, but like, and then yet this also deep knowing that change needs to happen and you're evolving, but not knowing where you're evolving to. So I love that frame of like, let's embrace this adventure. And to be honest, I feel like I am still like every kind of, there's always this chapter of reflection and change happening for me. I look
Mm-hmm.
back and I'm like, I don't know if I had one specific kind of intense Saturn return moment. I feel like it's just been this like really big constant evolution. And one of the lines that I just want to read from a chapter called Within, which I think just highlights very much in alignment with the work I love to do with people and what I profoundly believe, we as humans are here to do. You say your profound attunement to your inner world translates to an alignment in the world around you. So when your outer world does not reflect what you desire, take that as an invitation to dive within rather than first changing the circumstances around you.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that line because that's just such a reminder for us all of how important it is to pay attention also to our inner world. And I think we get so wrapped up in our lives looking in the outer world. Like, do I have that relationship right now? Do I have that house? Do I have the car? Do I have, this title at my job? Do I have this amount of money in my 401k or my savings account? Like we get very much like, oh, have I hit these external milestones versus, hey, am I listening from within? Am I connected
Yes.
to my own truth? And am I living in alignment with myself? So I'm curious, like, as you reflect back in your 20s, whether it was your Saturn return moment or not, what for you was like a big aha moment of like, I need to get in alignment with my inner self. I need to listen
Mm-hmm.
within.
Yeah, I mean it's it's a really brave thing to turn inward. Um,
Yeah, it's fucking
I
courageous,
just wanted
man.
to say that because
Yeah.
it's like, it's easy to look around and make meaning of everything rather than go inward and be very reflective and thoughtful about what you're bringing to every moment. That takes self-responsibility. That is very self-led. That is, yeah, there's a humbleness to that. But there's also a lot of liberation on the other side of that. So it is a brave move. But for me, there was many moments, but I think what's the moment that stands out the most was this period, I would say around 29, um, 29. And I had been single at that point since I was about 25. I was like dating and just like chasing after the wrong people for a few years in the wake of my breakup with my long-term boyfriend. So I had a boyfriend since college who I really thought, like, without a shadow of a doubt, that he was going to be my husband and we were going to just live happily ever after. And then I just started to get this, feeling that there were aspects of this relationship that really just were not aligned. And I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the awareness at the time to have a conscious conversation with him. He was an incredible man. Like, there was nothing technically wrong. However, we just were kind of growing apart. And so instead of having the conversation, I was unfaithful and I cheated on him, and it was such a betrayal. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. It was a betrayal of someone that I deeply loved. It was also self-betrayal, and I think that was a moment that sent me into just this like low period. I would say like a temporary depression. And I then, from that period for a few years, was believing all of the loop thoughts that I had about myself in the wake of that breakup, which were, you're not worthy of someone loving you. You once a cheater, always a cheater, or um, you must like contort yourself to be the person that someone else needs, or, you are just waiting to be chosen. And so, who I was attracting in those years, who I was chasing after in those years, reflected how I felt about myself. They were, subpar behavior across the board, texting me at 11 p.m. To see if I was available. And of course I was. And just being inconsistent, non communicative. I was settling for bad behavior. But this moment that I want to share was a Friday night, and I didn't have any plans, but I was hoping that like a friend or one of these guys would text me and ask me to hang out. And, I'd made myself dinner, and I was, trying my best to just kind of create this like Friday night moment for myself. But I was just like waiting by my phone, someone, please text me. And no one did. And I was like, okay, wow. You are giving so much power to other people to really start your life for you and to have fun and to be engaged in your life. And so I just found myself on the floor, literally crying. It was so, I think, dramatic is probably the word, but it was real. I was just like, I'm sick of this. I'm so, so sick of just chasing after people that have no time for me, that don't respect me. I'm sick of disrespecting myself. Like, this is not how I want to live my life. And these are not the types of relationships I want to be in. So it was that moment that I really committed to myself that I was going to stop dating and stop chasing, and I was going to date myself. And this was like the period of my sacredness of being single that was really, really sacred. And I think one of the most important periods of my life, because it actually set the tone for every other relationship that I have had and will have moving forward. And so this period was about just walking back to myself, no longer self-abandoning. Um, it was about learning and unlearning a lot of things, mainly through therapy. Why I am the way I am and who I really want to be and what does that require. And it was a process. It was such a deep process. But man, I came out the other side. I remember August 2019, I went on a little solo trip, which I did often in that period of my life. And I remember waking up in this like airstream in a little town in California. And I just like had so much gratitude and love for myself. I like was brought to tears. I like had my coffee on the little deck, and I was just like looking up at the sky, and the sun was beaming down on me. I was just like, oh my God, like I deeply love and respect myself. This is so crazy. It's just like an overwhelming feeling. And I'm okay. I am okay if I never meet my person. I knew that I would, but like I just had that acceptance, like deep acceptance that I would be okay, because I really just loved myself. I was like, I got me, if no one else has got me, I got me. And it was 2 months later that I reconnected with Sean, and, here we are today, married with a child. But um, it was just a period where I had to blindly have faith in myself and in my life and in the timing of my life. And it was that period that really just set the foundation for everything else. But honestly, Wade, like if God would have been like, hey, so, okay, your relationship is done, your long-term relationship is done, the person you thought you were going to marry, this is done, and you're going to be single for 7 years, I would have been like, no, I think I'm good. Like like I'm out. I don't want to do that. But it was one of the greatest gifts of my life.
Yeah. Oh God, the self-abandoning piece and the self-respect. I've totally been there. And to just like when you said you're sitting on the porch and felt the sun and looking at the sky and drinking your coffee, like and having that moment of just deep gratitude for you, your
Yeah.
body, your life, your breath. Like I have been there many times. And I think that's such a cycle we can go through of self-abandoning in little ways and big ways, and then coming
Mm.
back home and being like, ah, you know, and and just learning how we can reduce those moments of self-abandonment and really
Yes.
just stay within ourselves and stay within that sense of care for ourselves, respect for ourselves, for our life is such a practice. I'm curious, knowing you're now married with a kid, and I think this is something really interesting of like when we're in our 20s, I feel like there's this rush, there's this striving of like, I need to find my person, I need to find the job, I need to find the house, I need to have the kids, right? It's like there's such a striving, rushing energy. And then it's like, to what? To like get to that point. And then it's
Hmm.
like, then you get to that point and you're like, what? This is it? Or this is great. Like my life feels like different because now I'm a mom, I'm a parent, I'm a wife, I have all these other responsibilities. But then, so I'm curious, like, are there any words of wisdom or insight you would give your 20-year-old self who was in that in between moment, knowing now where you are and knowing like you did find your person and you are building your life in this new way?
Yeah, I think there were so many times, especially in my 20s, where I felt behind. And what I would say to her is, you're not behind, you are becoming. This is a period of deep becoming and remembering who you really are. And I mean, I have learned it over and over and over. I must trust the timing of my life every time, even if it's annoying, even if it's frustrating. The divine timing of my life is so much better than my own agenda. Like, it's so much better. It always has been. There has never been a moment where my agenda was better than, the divine timing of it. So I just now have this like archive or catalog of moments that prove to me that that is true. And I think about them all the time when I get frustrated or impatient, because it happens, we're human. But yeah, I think so many people out there, you could be any age, just feel like they are behind because they are looking around, they're comparing themselves to other people, especially now with social media. We see each other's lives or what we perceive to be people's lives, and we think, wow, I don't have that. What does that mean about me? Or, "Oh, I wish, I should be farther along. Look at all these people with their businesses or married with kids or traveling the world, whatever it is. We have this chronic comparisonitis, and it is robbing us of our joy and robbing us of being able to be present for our lives right now. Like you mentioned just a few minutes ago, just this like rushing, this like, we got to have it all figured out. We got to get on track or settled or got to get the thing that we think defines success or a good life. And like, the reality is that if we're rushing to get there, we are going to get there and be dissatisfied because the getting there was not absorbed, was not experienced for what it could have been experienced for. I think we've totally lost touch with the beauty of a process, where, people say like it's not about the destination, it's about the journey or whatever the right way to say that is. And it's corny, but it's also very, very true. We've just lost the respect for the process. And I think as humans, we just set up the next goalpost. So why not just enjoy the process that you're in, and really just give yourself the kudos and the respect and the reverence that you deserve in this current process that you're in.
100%. I think we get so conditioned of these like shiny big moments that are kind of, to relate it back to Instagram. It's like what are the big snapshots that we put on our homepage, right? Like we need these like big
Yeah.
shiny moments versus really slowing down to connect to these smaller moments that are just equally as beautiful or important or insightful or impactful. But yeah, when we rush through it, we miss, I like to say, like saving it to our hard drives, like saving it to our
Mhm.
systems to fill our cup.
100%. Yeah, it's that would be probably be one of my greatest like wishes for people who read the book. It's like, life is really long, hopefully. But generally it is. And your 30s aren't your peak. Your 20s aren't your peak. College isn't your peak, I promise you. If you went to college, like I promise you it's not your peak. And so can we just be a bit more in our lives and really participating on a day-to-day basis? Um, you will experience a lot more magic and a lot more, I think, fulfillment if you, by way of not, being so fixated on a goal or destination, you will let in a lot more fun and magic and just incredible experiences, which makes life just so much more fun.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned divine timing, and I'd like to kind of dive in deeper here because this is a lesson that I feel like I'm always practicing for myself of trusting the timing, trusting myself with the timing, and a little kind of experiment that helped me sink into it because you mentioned like you go back to this archive of moments that help you remember, oh yeah, like let me just trust this divine timing because it always has worked out better. This last like first quarter of the year, my husband and I were living abroad in Europe and traveling. And it was a different type of trip that we've ever had. Normally, we're a little bit more planned. This time, we literally sometimes didn't book a hotel or a train ticket or a plane ticket till like 24 hours, 12 hours before. It was very much in the present moment. And everything worked out.
Mm-hmm.
Everything worked out magically. Like no luggage got lost, nothing got overbooked, nothing was even that much more expensive. And it was a reminder for me of like, oh, yeah, like I don't have to control or over plan life or,
Mm-hmm.
um, white knuckle to this version that I had in my mind or the expectations. And it's like actually us being more present allowed us to be kind of flowing to like where the energy was pulling us in the moment. And
Yeah.
and so that was such a helpful practice for my own archive of insights. But I'd love to hear like where else have you been able to tap into this divine timing reminder and any insights of how we, myself included and listeners, can keep practicing it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a fun thing to explore for yourself and practice and almost like experiment, And I think one experience that stands out to me that I think illustrates this is around conceiving my son. And I really wanted it to happen at a certain point in a certain way, and I did all the things that I thought I should be doing. Um, and it was not happening in the timing that I wanted. And I was like very self-critical and just frustrated, and feeling like I'm losing time. And what was really interesting during that time, I found the book Spirit Babies, which is an incredible book I highly recommend for anyone desiring to conceive. And it allowed me to take the focus and pressure off of doing this thing, creating this life, and actually understand the energetics of this experience and understand that, my son has a soul that, you know, chose to come into our family and chose us very specifically. And just understanding it from another perspective and really like another dimension, quite literally. And so I kind of was able to pull out of my human experience for a moment. And the human experience was very dense. It was very like, okay, so what do we have to do? What's the protocol? And, just tracking ovulation to a T and like being really stressed out with my husband if like, he ate something bad or like whatever, just so silly. And I was able to pull up and out and just be like, oh, so this is not just about me doing the right things. This is actually like a collaboration with God, with the soul of our future child, with each other, with each other's souls. That is just much more energetic than we think it is. And so during the period between, when I wanted to get pregnant, um, and when I actually did get pregnant, there was this just 3-month window or so. So it wasn't a long time. And I understand people have a longer period of trying to conceive. And it can be very, very hard. But during this period, I was really being asked to release some friendships in particular that were no longer aligned, that were taking up energetic space in my life and also draining my energy, if I'm being frank. And it was difficult to kind of come to terms with that. And I realized after I got pregnant that, wow, that was a piece that needed to happen before Mav came in. I think he was kind of working on us. There was a few pieces of my husband's life, like in his career life, that were kind of coming together in a very particular way in that period. So it's just interesting, if you believe in it or not, up to you. But I believe in it wholeheartedly, and it actually allowed me to relax. It allowed my mind to relax, my body to relax around this whole process because I was just really focused or trusting in like the energetic orchestration of this as well. So I think we can really apply that to any time in our life where we feel impatient and we find it hard to trust the timing of our life. It's like there are things working on you and being worked out that you actually don't even know are happening, but need to happen in order for that thing to come into your life or come to fruition.
Yes. I think that's such a relatable experience you named of being in that waiting period, especially while conceiving, and you really have no fucking control. And and you really just have to surrender. And I'm hearing like, now in hindsight, recognizing it sounds like that relationship, like seeing all of the moving parts and pieces, how to kind of do its thing in order to create space for calling in motherhood and being able to
Yes.
conceive. Yeah, like reminding ourselves of those tiny moments. And I guess for listeners, it's like thinking to your life, where you can have those moments of experimentation and where you can rest back. Like I always say to myself, I notice and I'm getting into striving or controlling mode if I'm like leaning forward and I'm
Mm,
trying to over control. And I have to
totally.
watch, like I've started to learn those signals internally for myself. And then I like literally tell my body to rest back and down. And it allows me to settle and come back to this place of like, oh yeah, I'm flowing with life, which feels very counterintuitive to the programming, kind of full circle here, like the programming that I grew up with growing up in New York City. This like, no, you hustle, you go after what you want, you push, you strive, and learning how to kind of soften and trust like it will happen, not to
Yeah.
say like I'm not doing anything, I'm just chilling here twiddling my fingers, but that you can sit back and relax as long as you're in alignment in the inner world is set up.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. It's a deeply profound practice. And you don't have to start with like a big thing. You can start practicing this with little moments in your day to day. It could be as simple as You know what? I'm not gonna follow a strict time schedule today. I'm actually going to see like where I'm called and where I'm pulled to and how I'm called to flow. I'm going to take a walk and I'm going to make a left down this road when I would normally make a right. I'm kind of being called to explore here, and you might run into a friend you haven't seen in forever. Like, there's just ways in which we can practice this in lower stakes so that we build that confidence and that trust in this so that when that bigger stakes moment is there, we can be like, okay, I have proof that I can do this. Let's go for it.
How has that trust and divine timing supported you now as a mother and an almost 2-year old?
I know. In so many ways. I mean, for anyone listening who has a child, I know you know that the day to day is unpredictable in a lot of ways. It's funny. There's so many there's so many contradictions in that you could be on a schedule with your child, but how that schedule plays out or how your child is within that schedule, it can be very unpredictable. I think your child is changing all the time. So you have to be very agile with how you adapt to change. Um, so I mean, over and over, I'm constantly reminded that, I can't project onto my son the way I want things to be done or the timing in which I want milestones to be hit. There's so many moments where you really have to surrender to the timing that this little soul is choosing for every single thing. And that doesn't mean that I don't believe in discipline and setting boundaries and all of that, because I absolutely do. But there's, I think, an element to who they are as a soul that really calls you to double down on trusting the way that their life is unfolding and the way they are revealing themselves to you. Because I think part of our job, in addition to keeping our children safe and loving them, is to get to know them, every single day, like consciously get to know your child because we're bringing a lot of stuff to parenthood. We're bringing our own childhood, we're bringing how we are or how our partner is and thinking, well, they must be like that or I want them to be like that, and that's okay. I'm not saying that's wrong per se, but that leaves very little room for them to show you who they are on a soul level. So, I think there's a balance where you can guide them, you can nurture them, you can create an environment that is very loving and, promotes curiosity. And also, you know, there are many moments where I just take my foot off the gas or I enter into his world without judgment, criticism, and I just let him show me the way. And I learned so much. I learned so much. Um, And it makes parenting a lot more fun. It's not fun to always be in a control mode when you're a parent. That's very stressful. That's stressful for you. That's stressful for your child. And so I think the more you can just release your need to control it to, control the timing of it all and not compare your child to another child, the more fun you'll have as a parent.
Do you have him on like a sleep schedule and kind of use, because like that's something I've always been curious about, not being a mother yet, of just like how do you balance that? Because I see from Latin cultures, there's very much let the child lead. You know, they're out to dinner at midnight with the family, sleeping on the lap, very different from American culture where we follow a lot of people tend to follow more of a strict like nap schedule and sleep schedule.
Hmm.
So how do you balance that with letting Mav lead?
Yeah, totally. It's a really great question. And we've been on a serious sleep journey. So I have a lot to say about this. But what I will say is, every child is very, very different. So I don't like to recommend anything as like a blanket universal, this is going to work for you. But what we explored, and I will say I led on this, I think my husband was in the camp of let's just sleep train him. Like everyone does this. Why aren't we doing this? Intuitively, I didn't feel called to it. I didn't feel like it was right. But I know a lot of people who do it and it works out for them and it's all good. For me, for my first child, I was just strongly feeling like it wasn't for him and myself. So I actually feel like we experimented quite a bit in the first year, and that looked like him sleeping through the night just on his own from month 2 to 4, and it was amazing. And then once month 4 hit, it was just a wild adventure every night. I never knew what I was going to get. I was also breastfeeding until he was a year and a half, so that plays a part in just wanting comfort and having that in the middle of the night. Um, but how do I balance that? For me, it was important to do my research as far as circadian rhythm goes and their body and their systems and just how we can create the best environment, maybe the best schedule for a really deep restorative sleep at night and during his naps because they're growing so much. Sleep is incredibly important for everyone, but especially at their age. So, I actually worked with a sleep specialist. Her name is Lauren from Tiny Star Sleep. She's incredible. And she has a gentler approach that I really liked. No cry it out or anything like that, but more of a gentle approach to teaching the child how to fall asleep on their own so I can put him to bed at night and he's awake and he will, gradually go to sleep on his own, knowing that he is safe and he is loved and he's comfortable. Um, and that did work from 13 months on. I think the schedule is incredibly important for Mav. I've just noticed when we are on a schedule versus not. Um, I do think kids thrive off of patterns and predictability to a certain extent. Um, at least he does. So, why I implement a schedule, generally speaking, is because I now know that his circadian rhythm um, is one that is very predictable. So, waking up at 7, making sure we get some sunlight. We'll like go on the roof and get some sunlight in his eyes, very soft morning sunlight. And that really triggers a hormonal response so that his circadian rhythm is, functioning properly or kind of on track, if you will. And we nap 12:15 to 2, and then we go to bed around 7:15. Um, this, and I've experimented many, many times. This is what helps to give a better percentage of him sleeping deeply and very well overnight. Here's the thing about kids. There will be sleep disturbances because of teeth, because of developmental leaps, because of sickness, bad dreams. Like it just is what it is. And so I have found the schedule to be very helpful. And I also have found that, for example, this past weekend, we had a holiday weekend. We weren't at home. We were traveling. We weren't quite in our usual rhythm. I have to be flexible. And that's okay too. And I have to expect that maybe the nighttime isn't going to be smooth. And that's okay. So I try to be as flexible as possible to not stress myself or him or anyone else out. Um, but when we are in our rhythm and flow, a schedule has really, really worked for us. And I might do it differently the second time around. So I'm not sure. I have to get to know that child. But for Mav, even though it hasn't been easy for me, this process and this like journey of sleep has been exactly what it's meant to be. And I've learned so, so much. And I think, Mav's in a good rhythm now, but I'm also just like very okay with things being a bit unpredictable while he's young.
Yeah. And what a beautiful example of trusting the process, learning from your process,
Yeah.
And what I also hear of that balance of having some structure and also the flexibility that is needed is just, I feel like, basic life skills, which can sometimes be
Yes.
so challenging.
So challenging. So challenging. And I think, sometimes I've definitely been like critical before I became a mom of moms that were like, schedule, schedule, schedule. And I'm like, I kind of get it now. I'm like, for a kid to know what comes next in different scenarios, whether it's like we sit down at the table when we have our lunch, or we snuggle with mommy and read a book before bed every single night. Like, man, that is like safety. That is that predictability, that comfort, that knowing. And you just are blown away by how fast they latch on to patterns. So if things are unpredictable every day, it totally might work for some kids. And I do think that there's a part of every person's brain that craves a little sense of pattern, of predictability in some ways. As we get older, we can kind of get better relationship with the unknown and unpredictability. But I do think, in my experience, kids thrive off of that.
Yeah, and even adult, right? Consistency is grounding to
Yeah,
a certain element. So
definitely.
that makes complete sense. Lindsey, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights and wisdom and the book with us. Where can people learn more about you and stay connected to all the gifts you share?
Thank you, Wade. I appreciate you having me back on. I love your show and I love just the way that you lead conversations. It's just so thoughtful. So I appreciate you. Um, the book is out June 3rd. So I would love for people to get the book, to gift the book to people. I think it's a really special gift, even if they're not almost 30, I know that's the title, but if you have a friend or a family member moving through change, I know this book will be supportive. So that's you can get the book at almost30.com/book. You can follow us on every social platform at Almost 30 Podcast. You can listen to us on any podcast platform. And then I'm on Instagram at Lindsey Simcik. And for any new moms, I'm kind of focusing a lot of my content on new mom life and my brand new mom on the block. We're going to kick back up the YouTube channel, so you can check that out as well. But I adore you. Thank you so much for having me on again.
Thank you. And I just want to echo, I think this book is, I know it's centered around the Saturn return moment, but honestly, I think it's just such a great like self check-in moment with all the journal prompts. So I really welcome listeners to grab a copy or gift a copy for anybody just looking for an opportunity to meet yourself and get to know
Mhm.
yourself, because I think there's just so much wisdom there.
Thank you for that. You're the
Yeah.
best.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I welcome you to check out the show notes, all of the amazing links of how you can stay connected to Lindsey and her work. Join us in the conversation on Instagram at OneWade and at Lindsey Simcik. We'd love to hear your takeaways, what's resonating for you, what insights have sparked curiosity. I know personally, this episode just reminded my heart and my nervous system to continue to trust the timing of life, to trust the unfolding. And when I do that, I notice so much more ease comes over my body, and I feel more present to receive each moment, to live each moment, feeling like, yep, this is all I can control is this moment. I can be present right here, right now. So share with us what's present for you. Share this episode with one of your besties. And thank you, as always, for welcoming me into your ears, your heart, your mind. It is such a gift to be with you. Until next time, stay centered.